Ho, 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 Merry Christmas. Though it's not actually Christmas yet. It's just like the protagonist of the show I'm going to be talking about today. I've been pulled into another world, a reality where apparently Christmas starts much earlier than it does in our reality. Or else this is just how things are now, one or the other. Though I think if we're starting Christmas celebrations before I've even finished my Thanksgiving leftovers, something's gone wrong. Still, it's appropriate enough that my studio is set up for Christmas already because the show I'm talking about today is a real gift. Today I'm giving you my 2 cents on the Netflix show Centaurworld, and I'll be honest, this is one that I intended to sleep on until I did see some positive stuff about it online and was asked again to cover it, which is not to say that it didn't seem interesting. It did. The premise of it being that the horse from a grim and gritty fantasy story gets pulled through a portal isekai style into a more bright and cheery My Little Pony-esque fantasy world. But in doing so, she leaves her rider behind in the midst of a battle and doesn't know what happened to her, and now she has to quest to get back. And while that does, like I said, sound interesting, it sounds very straightforward. Like the kind of thing that, at its cleverest, is just gonna poke fun at the differences between more modern, realistic fantasy and the more kid-friendly fantasy of things like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. In fact, the bright, colorful fantasy world that Horse ends up in, Centaurworld, is a world where everything is a centaur, sort of a turned-up-to-11 version of the world of Equestria, in which My Little Pony is set, where every pony is a pony. More or less, that's where the turned-up-to-11-ness of it comes in. Obviously, there are other creatures in Friendship is Magic, but you get my point. And frankly, we don't know that there aren't other kinds of creatures in Centaurworld yet, either, because I've only watched the first episode of the show. And man, while at the basis level I wasn't wrong about what this show is, I was certainly wrong about how it was going to present itself. It's not simple at all, though it's a bit deceptive in that regard, because it definitely feels simpler than it is. If I'm reading correctly into what this show is going to be about as it progresses, and this one has definitely been added to my list of shows to watch, and if it does turn out to be even half of what I expect it to be, it's one that I am going to review properly in its entirety for season 1 and then cover for any subsequent seasons that it gets. Because while the grim and gritty fantasy world that we see at the beginning is that, it's not entirely that. There's a glimmer of something more hopeful to it. Like, there's a song number in that world, which genuinely surprised me. Ryder sings a song to Horse to help her find the courage to get through a dangerous, frightening location so they can continue on their quest. It's a genuinely moving song, too. Like, some of the music in this isn't meant to be taken seriously. There's multiple song numbers in this episode, but even the ones that clearly aren't, that are clearly more jokey, are still good. And the song numbers that are meant to be moving and emotional are moving and emotional. It's really good stuff. And then on top of that, Ryder and Horse's quest right now is to get a horseshoe-shaped artifact to their general. They don't know if their general's alive anymore or not at this point, but that was what they were trying to do originally. Because apparently the artifact has the power to turn things around for the good guys in their world. I think the term they used was that it holds the key to their victory, or to saving everyone, or something like that. But it's the artifact that isekais Horse into Centaurworld, where there's magic. Like, the plot of this episode specifically is that in order to get out of the safe part of Centaurworld, Centaur Valley, you need magic. Horse doesn't have magic, so she has to convince the herd that kinda sorta takes her in when she arrives there to help her by going with her and using their magic to open the barrier. But her world does have magic. Even though she doesn't know what magic is prior to this, her world does have magic. The artifact is a magic artifact. And seeing how the artifact is the key to their victory, I think what the show is saying is that returning magic to their world, bringing it from Centaurworld back to their world, is the way to fix things. Which says to me that this show is going to be about bringing magic back to the genre of fantasy. But at the same time, you have the herd in Centaurworld and Centaur Valley who do the same thing day in and day out in this bubble of safeness, cut off from anything that might be just a little bit risky. And I'm sure you can tell where I'm going with this. It's also saying that family-friendly, colorful, bright, classic fantasy shouldn't play things safe exclusively and should be willing to take risks. That the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I like that a lot. And like, so far, it doesn't seem to be much more to the show's themes than that, aside from like a theme of found family, but they even poke at that a little bit. Like, is this found family-esque herd a little codependent? Maybe we should talk about that, which to me said that they endorse being critical of kid-friendly fantasy shows, which is obviously something I believe in too. It's a lot. There's layers to it. The show is saying a lot, or it seems to be saying a lot about stuff that I have opinions on in this line of work. So I'm pretty psyched to watch it. On top of that, the voice acting is great, and the Centaurworld characters, they're very weird, and I can imagine they're not going to be for everybody, but they're still very funny, and I see a lot of potential in them and how they play off of each other. Not so much in their magical abilities, which were just kind of creepy and not in the fun way, but we'll see. We'll see where that goes. And the animation is just so freaking good. Like, everything from the weird designs of the Centaurworld characters and objects, even like clouds, like explosion clouds and everything, are like centaurs. It's absolutely wild. Everything from that, like the animation required to pull that off, and they do pull it off, to the animation in the grim and gritty world that Horse came from. Like, there's this one scene where Horse and Ryder are trying to ride their way through an enemy blockade, and Ryder aggro jumps herself off of Horse and attacks enough of the guys to clear a path, and then just hops back onto Horse. They're so in sync, and the animation was just gorgeous. I'm genuinely psyched for this show. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't entirely live up to my expectations, but it has a lot of potential. And as I said a bit earlier, if it lives up to even half of that potential, I think I'm going to enjoy the ride. However, while I did say at the top of this review that I have seen some people talking about this show in the positive, that's really all that I've seen of people talking about this show, is just those few people saying some nice things about it. Did people just not watch this show? Like, if you haven't watched this show, you should watch this show, I think. At least give it a shot, like I have. Your opinions of it may change. That said, though, I don't want to get more into what I think the themes of the show are going to be, since I do intend to do a full review of Season 1 sometime relatively soon. I'm super busy right now, but I'll get it out as soon as I can, right? So I'm gonna end things here for today. This has been my 2 cents on Centaurworld so far. If you guys have seen it, no spoilers, please. What do you think of it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content. Subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.